Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a deeply personal, honestly, profoundly moving story today. It's a look at finding totally unexpected human connection in what's arguably one of the most restrictive, locked-down environments you could possibly imagine, a psychiatric ward. You know, when we think about involuntary treatment or psychiatric hospitalization, our minds almost automatically jump straight to clinical coldness, right? Just profound, absolute isolation. But the source material we're looking at today, written from the first-hand experience of author Andrew Turtle, completely flips that assumption on its head. It's really a story about vulnerability, the difficult road to recovery, and just the incredible resilience of the human spirit.
Okay, let's dive into this. When the author first faced hospitalization, he carried this fear that I think is pretty universally understood, that deep dread of being entirely locked away from the outside world. Going into this experience, his overwhelming expectation was just complete and utter loneliness. And honestly, when you look at how this system is physically structured, it makes perfect sense why anyone would brace themselves for total isolation.
Part 1. The expectation of isolation.
See, the physical realities of entering a psychiatric hospital carry this really heavy, undeniable weight. The environment itself is literally designed to separate you from your normal life. The loss of your everyday liberties is so immediate and stark. Contact with your family and friends, suddenly strictly limited, completely bound by designated visiting hours. Think about the simple things we all take totally for granted. Taking a casual walk through your neighborhood, running down to the corner store, or literally just sitting under a tree at a park. Poof. Gone. Your basic freedom simply evaporates the very second those heavy ward doors lock behind you.
Part 2. An unexpected community forms.
And this brilliantly illustrates a truly fascinating paradox. Because despite the intense physical restrictions, we're talking locked doors, incredibly rigid schedules, the reality he actually encountered was surprisingly social. Instead of just sitting alone in silence, the inhabitants spent their days sharing meals together, watching TV, playing games, and just talking. The restrictive, highly clinical environment unexpectedly acted as a sort of pressure cooker for deep, emotional social connection.
Real quick, before we go any further, I want to highlight a specific term the author uses to describe his peers on the ward: consumers. Now, consumer is a term often used within the mental health system and the lived experience movement. It describes someone who is actively receiving mental health care. What it does is shift the focus away from that purely medicalized patient label, and it grounds the conversation in the empowering language of the mental health recovery movement.
So these consumers actually became his absolute greatest source of companionship. While everyone in that ward was actively dealing with their own immense, heavy personal challenges, they got along remarkably well. Stripped completely of the normal distractions of the outside world, they formed this profound temporary community. And they weren't bonding over superficial, everyday things, right? They were brought together by a deeply shared experience of distress, true vulnerability, and the incredibly difficult process of recovery.
Part 3. Studying human nature.
Being a writer, the author was naturally super curious about human nature, so he intentionally observed this little community. With practically nothing to distract them from one another, he spent a ton of time just paying close attention to the fascinating people all around him. And he shared this really powerful insight that I want you to just let sink in for a second. Behind every diagnosis was a person with a unique history, personality, sense of humor, and way of understanding the world. The ward essentially became a safe space where stories were exchanged freely. They weren't just a collection of clinical labels. They were beautifully complex human beings.
Part 4. The dialectics of mania.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how that deep fascination with the humanity inside the ward actually became a central part of his book, which is titled The Dialectics of Mania. To protect his peers' identities, he completely avoided referring to them by their clinical labels. Instead, he created a ward roll call based entirely on their assigned identities. He gave people names based on their vibrant, standout human characteristics rather than what was written in their medical files. So he might affectionately dub someone the philosopher or the midnight baker, really ensuring they were remembered as individual people first, not just diagnoses.
And because of this intense focus on shared humanity, he came to a pretty stunning realization. The crazy paradox of psychiatric hospitalization is that yes, it violently disconnects you from the outside world, but at the exact same time, it immerses you in a community of people who truly, deeply understand what you are going through. He noted that some of the absolute most meaningful conversations he had during his entire admission weren't with the medical professionals at all. They were directly with his fellow consumers, because they alone possess the actual lived experience to truly understand that distress.
Part 5. Connection in the dark.
Now, as inspiring as this tight-knit community was, we absolutely have to look at the complete picture here. The lingering pain was a constant, heavy companion to all that connection. He deeply, deeply missed his family, his friends, and just his baseline freedom. There were genuinely terrifying moments where the physical walls of the ward truly seemed to be closing in on him. That profound loneliness definitely still existed, and it coexisted right alongside the newfound community. It was a stark, incredibly difficult reality to navigate day in and day out.
Yet despite all the obvious shortcomings of the system, the ward served as this really powerful reminder. It proved that human beings possess an extraordinary, almost miraculous capacity to find connection and meaning, even in the absolute most restrictive and frightening environments imaginable. Sure, the friendships formed in that ward might have been temporary, the conversations might have been brief, and the circumstances were, well, they were certainly far from ideal. But for a distinct period of time, they were all traveling through the exact same uncertain landscape together.
Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought to leave you with today. We've just seen how a group of highly vulnerable individuals, completely stripped of their freedoms and facing immense personal distress, somehow managed to build a deeply meaningful community. So we really have to ask ourselves, if profound human connection can thrive behind locked psychiatric ward doors, where are we missing it out here in the free world? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Take a moment today to look for those connections in your own life, and I'll see you next time.